I stood frozen in my wedding dress as my mother nervously arranged my veil, whispering, "You should know you're adopted," before walking down the aisle. 28 years of family photos suddenly felt like borrowed memories, while guests waited expectantly in the church below. The bridal suite of the Grand Haven Hotel buzzes with activity. My maid of honor adjusts my veil while the photographer captures candid moments of champagne toasts and laughter. 3 hours until I walk down the aisle to marry Ryan, culminating our 7-year relationship with promises of forever. "Morgan, sweetie," my mother's voice cuts through the excitement. "Your father and I need a quick word." Privately. Something in her tone makes my stomach tighten. I follow them into the adjoining sitting room, careful not to wrinkle my carefully steamed gown. My father closes the door behind us, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "What's wrong?" I ask, mentally cataloging potential disasters, venue problems, family drama, weather concerns. My mother smooths invisible wrinkles from her silk dress, a nervous habit I've observed my entire life. "We need to tell you something before the ceremony. Can it wait? We're on a pretty tight schedule." I checked the vintage watch that had belonged to my grandmother, my something old for the day. "No, it can't." My father's voice is firm. "You deserve to know before you marry Ryan." My mother takes a deep breath. "Morgan, you're adopted." For words. Simple. Direct. Life-altering. I stare at them, waiting for more explanation, for context, for anything that might soften the abrupt revelation. The room seems to tilt slightly. The sounds from the bridal party fade to a distant hum. "I'm what?" My voice emerges steadier than I feel, a lifetime of maintaining composure in difficult situations serving me well. "We adopted you when you were 3 days old," my father continues, his tone matter-of-fact, as if discussing a minor detail rather than shattering my entire understanding of my identity. "We've always planned to tell you, but the timing never seemed right." The timing never seemed right, I repeat slowly. "So you chose my wedding day?" 3 hours before I walk down the aisle. My mother reaches for my hand. I let her take it, too stunned to pull away. "We felt you should know everything about yourself before starting this new chapter." I look from my mother to my father, searching their faces for any recognition of what they've just done. These people who raised me for 28 years, who taught me to be thoughtful and considerate, see nothing wrong with dropping this bomb on what should be the happiest day of my life. "Who knows about this?" I ask, my mind already calculating the ripple effects. "The family knows," my father says. "Your aunts, uncles, cousins. Your grandparents, of course. Everyone. My entire family has known this fundamental truth about me that I myself was never permitted to know." "Do you have information about my birth parents?" My voice remains measured, giving nothing away of the earthquake happening inside me. My mother nods. "We have the paperwork. We can discuss it after the honeymoon." After the honeymoon. As if I could simply file away this revelation to be addressed at a more convenient time. "I see." I straighten my shoulders, adjusting the bodice of my wedding dress. "Is there anything else I should know before I get married today? Any other life-altering secrets you've been keeping for nearly 3 decades? My father frowns. "There's no need for sarcasm, Morgan. We're telling you because we love you." "There's never a perfect time for news like this," my mother adds. "We thought you were mature enough to handle it now." Mature enough. As if my maturity were the issue, not their decision to upend my identity moments before I'm meant to publicly commit to a lifetime with someone. I look at the closed door, behind which my bridesmaids wait, oblivious to the seismic shift that has just occurred. Ryan is somewhere in this building, straightening his tie, perhaps sharing a toast with his groomsmen, unaware that the woman he's about to marry has just fundamentally changed. "I need to get back," I say quietly. "The makeup artist needs to finish." "Morgan," my mother begins, concern finally creeping into her voice. "Are you okay? Am I okay?" An absurd question under the circumstances. "I'm getting married in 3 hours," I reply, each word precisely chosen. "I'll process this later. We can talk more after the ceremony," my father offers, as if that would remedy the situation. I nod, not trusting myself to speak further. I open the door and return to the bridal suite, where my best friends immediately notice something is wrong. "Everything okay?" Zoe asks, adjusting my train. Fine, I smile, the expression not reaching my eyes. Just some last-minute parent stuff. As the makeup artist approaches with her brush, I close my eyes, focusing on my breathing. In, out. Controlled. Measured. I will not let this derail my wedding day. I will not give my parents the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The woman in the mirror looks exactly the same as she did 20 minutes ago. Same dark hair, same hazel eyes, same features I've always attributed to family genetics that are now revealed as coincidence or fantasy. I am a stranger to myself, but no one else will know that today. The ceremony will proceed. I will say my vows to Ryan with conviction. I will dance and laugh and cut the cake. And later, when the dust settles, I will begin to understand who Morgan Reed really is. Bora Bora's pristine waters shimmer outside our overwater bungalow, but I barely notice the postcard perfect scenery. 2 weeks into what should be a dream honeymoon, I sit cross-legged on the king-sized bed, laptop open, methodically scrolling through family photos I've downloaded from my cloud storage. Ryan is snorkeling, an activity I've begged off for the 3rd day in a row. Claiming a headache. It's not entirely a lie. My head has pounded constantly since my parents' pre-wedding revelation. I've maintained composure throughout the wedding and honeymoon, compartmentalizing with a skill that would impress a therapist. But in private moments like this, I allow myself to examine the pieces of my fractured identity with clinical detachment. The photos tell a story I never thought to question. Baby Morgan with dark hair and hazel eyes, not quite matching my blonde mother, or my father with his deep blue gaze. Features similar enough that no one ever questioned our biological connection, different enough that I now see what should have been obvious. I create a folder, adoption research, and begin filling it with organized subfolders: medical history, legal questions, biological family, appearance comparisons, timeline inconsistencies. Under medical history, I note the oddities that suddenly make sense. My peanut allergy in a family where no one else has food allergies. The asthma that puzzled doctors given my parents' perfect respiratory health. The blood type discrepancy I'd noticed on medical forms but dismissed as clerical error. Under timeline inconsistencies, I document the strange gaps in my early infancy photos. Plenty of hospital pictures, then nothing until I appear to be about 2 weeks old. No pictures of my mother pregnant, despite her meticulous documentation of every other life event. My phone chimes with a text from my mother. Just checking in, honey. You haven't answered our calls. Are you enjoying the honeymoon? I don't respond. I haven't spoken to my parents since we left for the airport the day after the wedding. My emotions aren't settled enough for productive conversation. Ryan returns from snorkeling, his skin sun-kissed, his smile fading when he sees me surrounded by digital evidence of my investigation. Morgan, he says gently, sitting beside me. Maybe take a break? I shake my head. I need to understand why they did this. Why tell me on our wedding day? Why wait 28 years? Ryan has been remarkably supportive, holding me through the tears I finally allowed myself on our first night here, listening as I process the implications aloud. But he can't fully comprehend what it's like to question your entire existence. What have you found? He asks, nodding toward my organized folders. Patterns, I reply, opening the document where I've been analyzing potential motives. My parents have always been controlling, dictating my major, approving my friends, pushing me towards suitable activities. I always attributed it to overprotectiveness, but now I wonder if it's more complicated. I show him another document, a timeline of other significant moments when my parents exerted unusual control: high school graduation, college decision, our engagement announcement. Each marked by my parents inserting themselves in ways that directed attention and influence toward their preferences. You think they told you about the adoption on our wedding day deliberately? To what end? Ryan's brow furrows. To maintain control of the narrative, I say, the certainty growing as I articulate it. By telling me at the most emotionally heightened moment, when I couldn't possibly process it properly, they ensured I wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't take attention away from the perfect family image they've cultivated. Ryan doesn't disagree. He was there when my mother insisted on changing our wedding colors 3 months before the ceremony. When my father surprised us by upgrading our reception venue to one that would impress his colleagues. when they added 15 people to our guest list without consultation. What's your next step? He asks. Research, I say, clicking open a new tab. I need to understand my legal rights regarding adoption records in our state. Then I'll find a therapist who specializes in adult adoption issues. Then I'll decide how to address this with my parents. Ryan squeezes my hand. Whatever you need, I'm here. That night, after Ryan falls asleep, I send a single text to my mother. We'll talk when I return. I need space to process this information. I power off my phone and return to my research, making notes on adoption laws and requesting information from agencies. Each fact gathered, each resource identified adds to my growing sense of strategy. BY morning, I've shifted from shocked bride to methodical investigator. The betrayal still stings, but now there's purpose in my pain. I will reconstruct my identity not as my parents have controlled it, but as I choose to understand it, and I will ensure they recognize that their timing wasn't merely unfortunate. It was the final evidence of a pattern of manipulation I can now see with painful clarity. I close my laptop and join Ryan for breakfast on our private deck. For the first time since our wedding day, I find myself genuinely smiling as we plan a day of island exploration. You seem different today, he observes. I am, I reply. I can't change what they did, but I can control what happens next. As we sail across crystal waters that afternoon, I feel the first tendrils of something unexpected: gratitude. Not for my parents' deception or their disastrous timing, but for the clarity their betrayal has provided. The woman who returns from this honeymoon will not be the compliant daughter they've always known. She will be someone entirely new, someone they never anticipated creating with their perfectly timed revelation. Our suitcases are barely unpacked when I begin implementing my strategy. Ryan heads back to work while I take an additional week of planned vacation time, originally intended for honeymoon recovery, now repurposed for what I've come to think of as Operation Truth. My first appointment is with Dr. Elaine Bennett, a therapist specializing in adoption trauma and family dynamics. Her office is warm but professional, much like her demeanor as I recount the wedding day revelation. What they did was remarkably cruel, she says after listening to my story. Not the adoption itself, but the deception and especially the timing. Her validation steadies me. I'd begun questioning whether my reaction was disproportionate after receiving 14 messages from family members suggesting I was overreacting or being dramatic. I need tools for setting boundaries, I explain, without burning bridges I might later want to preserve. Dr. Bennett nods. That's wise. Many in your situation swing between total estrangement and complete capitulation. There's a middle path that preserves your dignity while leaving room for potential reconciliation. We spend the hour discussing concrete communication strategies. I take notes, adding them to the growing collection of resources in my adoption binder. My next stop is a consultation with a family law attorney. Not to pursue legal action, but to understand my rights regarding adoption records. New York state laws have changed significantly, the attorney explains. You're entitled to your original birth certificate and identifying information about your birth parents. I file the necessary paperwork before leaving her office, another step completed in my methodical approach. Back home, I draft an email to my parents, my first substantial communication since their revelation * mom and dad. I'm ready to discuss the adoption disclosure. I'm requesting a meeting on neutral ground, the Riverside Cafe next Saturday at 2 p.m. I need answers to specific questions about my history and your decision-making process. Until then, I'm maintaining limited contact to focus on processing this information properly. Morgan * short, direct, unemotional. I send it without hesitation, then move on to my next task, creating a support network independent of my family. I call Zoe, my oldest friend and maid of honor, inviting her for coffee. When we meet, I explain the situation without dramatic embellishment, simply laying out the facts. They told you this on your wedding day. Her outrage is validating after my family's collective dismissal of the timing. That's beyond inappropriate, Morgan. I need allies, I tell her. People who understand that my issue isn't the adoption itself, but the deception and the timing. Count me in, she says without hesitation. What do you need? Space to rebuild my narrative, I reply. and witnesses to whatever comes next. By week's end, I've assembled what Ryan jokingly calls my truth team: Zoe, two other close friends, Ryan's sister Kelsey, who's experienced similar family manipulation, and Dr. Bennett for professional guidance. I've also compiled a comprehensive list of questions for my parents, organizing them by category: adoption circumstances, birth family medical history, and the decision to withhold information until my wedding day. When Saturday arrives, I prepare with the same care I would for a critical work presentation. Professional attire, neither too formal nor casual. Hair neatly styled. Minimal makeup. A neutral expression practiced in the mirror until it reveals nothing of the turmoil beneath. Ryan drives me to the cafe, squeezing my hand before I exit the car. Remember, you control this narrative now, not them. I enter the cafe 10 minutes early, selecting a corner table with good sightlines and some privacy. I arrange my notebook and water glass, then wait with practiced calm. My parents arrive exactly on time, my mother's anxious glances contrasting with my father's attempt at casual confidence. They spot me and approach, hesitating when they notice my composed demeanor. "Morgan," my mother begins, reaching for a hug I subtly avoid by extending my hand instead. The handshake catches her off guard. Our family has always been physically affectionate. "Thank you for coming," I say, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "I appreciate your willingness to meet." The formality clearly unsettles them. These are not the words of their compliant daughter, the one who has always sought their approval and accommodation. "Of course we came," my father says, attempting to regain familiar footing. "We've been worried about you." "I imagine so," I reply neutrally. "I've been researching adoption law and processing the significant information you shared on my wedding day." My mother flinches at the deliberate mention of the timing. "Morgan, sweetie, we know the timing wasn't ideal. I'd like to start with some specific questions." I interrupt gently but firmly, opening my notebook. "Then we can discuss broader concerns about trust and communication moving forward." My father's eyebrows rise at my organized approach. They expected tears, perhaps. Anger. Emotional vulnerability they could manage with practiced parental authority. Instead, they face a woman who has spent 3 weeks methodically preparing for this conversation, who has anticipated their responses and planned her counterpoints. As I glance down at my first question, I catch their exchange of uncertain looks. They're off balance, encountering a version of me they don't recognize. Good. That makes 2 of us. The Riverside Cafe hums with afternoon patrons as I face my parents across the polished table. My notebook lies open, questions methodically listed in my precise handwriting, a physical barrier between us. "Let's start with the most pressing issue," I begin, my voice steady. "Why did you choose my wedding day to share this information?" My mother glances at my father before answering. "We've explained this, Morgan. We wanted you to begin your marriage knowing your full history." "That doesn't address the timing," I counter. "Why 3 hours before the ceremony? Why not a month before? A year before? 28 years before?" "There's never a perfect time for news like this," my father says, repeating the same dismissive phrase from the bridal suite. "We made the best decision we could." I take a careful sip of water, maintaining eye contact. "Let me explain how your timing affected my wedding day and honeymoon." I describe, in measured detail, how their revelation overshadowed what should have been joyful moments. How I walked down the aisle questioning my identity. How our first dance was performed by a bride mentally cataloging which facial features might belong to unknown biological parents. How intimate honeymoon moments were interrupted by waves of grief over a history suddenly rendered uncertain. "We didn't intend," my mother begins. "Impact matters more than intention," I interrupt softly. "My wedding album arrived yesterday. In every photo, I'm performing happiness while internally processing an identity crisis you chose to trigger hours before." For the first time, uncertainty flickers across my father's face. My mother's eyes dampen with nascent tears. They expected defensiveness, perhaps anger, but not this calm articulation of consequences. "We thought you were strong enough to handle it," my father attempts. "My strength isn't the issue. Your judgment is." I turn to a new page in my notebook. I have questions about my adoption that need answers today. For the next 40 minutes, I methodically work through my list. My birth mother's name and medical history. My birth father's identity, unknown, apparently. The circumstances of my adoption, private, arranged through a church organization. Whether any contact agreements existed, none. Whether any biological relatives had ever sought information about me, no, but my parents seemed suspiciously uncertain. Throughout, I maintained professional composure, as if conducting a particularly sensitive client interview rather than excavating my own origins. Why did you decide not to tell me until adulthood? I ask, reaching the final section of my questions. Why mother shifts uncomfortably. We wanted you to have a normal childhood without confusion about who your real parents were. That was our decision to make, my father adds, a hint of defensiveness returning. It was your decision, I acknowledge. But now I need to make mine about how we proceed. I close my notebook and look at them directly. I'm establishing new boundaries. I'll be taking time to process this information properly. I'll be seeking my original birth certificate and potentially searching for biological relatives. I may explore therapy to address the implications of lifelong deception by the people I trusted most. My mother reaches for my hand. I let her take it, but don't return the pressure of her fingers. Morgan, please don't let this change everything between us, she pleads. We're still your parents. We still love you. I don't doubt your love, I reply honestly. But I question your respect. You denied me agency in understanding my own identity for 28 years, then delivered life-altering information at a moment when I couldn't possibly process it appropriately. My father's jaw tightens. We raised you. We gave you everything. Including the truth? I ask quietly. That came with conditions and timing that served your needs, not mine. I gather my belongings, signaling the end of our meeting. I'll contact you when I'm ready for further discussion. Until then, I'd appreciate space. No unannounced visits. No family members sent to advocate for your perspective. You're shutting us out. My father's voice rises slightly. I'm establishing healthy boundaries, I correct him. There's a difference. Standing, I meet their gaze one final time. I don't question that you love me. I've never doubted that. But love without respect and honesty isn't enough. As I walk away, my mother calls after me, her voice breaking. Morgan, please, I turn briefly. I'll call next week. Right now, I need to understand who I am outside of the narrative you've controlled my entire life. The door closes behind me as I step into afternoon sunlight. Ryan waits in the car, a silent supporter ready to receive whatever emotional aftermath might follow, but there is no breakdown, no collapse into long-suppressed tears. There is only calm certainty that the hardest conversation is now behind me, and the path forward, however uncertain, belongs to me alone. The initial ripples from my confrontation with my parents quickly become waves throughout our extended family. 3 days after our cafe meeting, my phone registers 17 missed calls and 32 text messages from various relatives. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, leaves a particularly revealing voicemail. Morgan, your mother is absolutely devastated. I understand learning about the adoption was difficult, but refusing to speak to your parents is simply cruel after everything they've done for you. I forward the message to Dr. Bennett, who responds with validation. Notice how quickly the narrative shifts to your cruelty rather than acknowledging their deception. Classic redirection. Ryan monitors the messages, filtering critical ones from those showing genuine concern. My cousin Kate falls into the latter category. Whatever they've told everyone, I want you to know I thought telling you on your wedding day was completely wrong. I said so at the time. This revelation, that someone in the family recognized the inappropriate timing and objected, strengthens my resolve to maintain boundaries. 1 week after our confrontation, my grandmother requests a visit. Unlike others, she asks rather than demands, offering to meet wherever I'm comfortable. I agree to coffee at my apartment with Ryan present. I knew you were adopted from the beginning, she says after settling onto our couch. I want you to know I told your parents repeatedly that you deserved to know earlier. Why didn't they listen? I ask, she sighs. Your father has always needed to control narratives. Your mother defers to him on important decisions. Neither considered how devastating the timing would be. Did anyone stand up for me at the wedding? I ask. After they told me? I did, she says firmly. I told them they'd made a terrible mistake. Your grandfather refused to speak to your father for the rest of the reception. This solidarity, even retroactive, loosens something tight in my chest. Someone had recognized the wrongness in the moment. Someone had defended my right to better treatment. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of my research continue unfolding. My request for original birth records is processing. A DNA testing kit arrives, promising potential connections to biological relatives. Ryan supports each step, holding me through nightmares where I'm perpetually searching through empty rooms for people whose faces I can't quite see. He fields invasive questions from his own parents, protecting my privacy with gentle but firm boundaries. Your mother called me directly, he informs me over dinner, 2 weeks after the confrontation. Wanted to know if I could talk some sense into you. What did you say? I told her that you're showing remarkable strength and clarity, and that pressuring you would only delay any potential reconciliation. I reach for his hand. Thank you for having my back. Always, he replies. Though I didn't have to defend you. Your actions speak for themselves. The consequences for my parents become increasingly apparent as they navigate a social landscape altered by their own actions. My father's sister calls to report that my parents left Sunday dinner early after uncomfortable questions about their decision. My mother canceled her monthly lunch with her book club friends, unwilling to face potential judgment. 3 weeks after our confrontation, the DNA test results arrive. I open the email alone, preferring private space for whatever revelations might follow. The results are simultaneously overwhelming and anticlimactic. Genetic connections to dozens of distant relatives, including 3 potential second or third cousins, but no immediate family matches. I share the information with Ryan that evening. It's strange, I tell him. I feel disappointment and relief simultaneously. You can pursue further or wait, he reminds me. There's no timeline you have to follow. Later that night, I receive an unexpected message via the DNA platform's communication system. Hello, Morgan. My name is Sarah. According to our DNA match, we may be half-siblings. I was adopted as an infant in 1990 from Grove Springs Adoption Services. If you're comfortable, I'd welcome communication. Sarai stare at the message, my heart racing. A sister. A biological connection I never knew existed. The implications unfold rapidly in my mind. Shared birth mother. Potentially shared features, experiences, medical history. After careful consideration, I reply, Sarah, I just discovered my adoption 3 weeks ago on my wedding day. I'm still processing everything, but would welcome careful communication as we both navigate this discovery. Morgan, when I share the development with Dr. Bennett at our next session, she emphasizes the importance of managing expectations. Biological connections don't automatically create meaningful relationships, she cautions. Approach carefully, protecting your emotional well-being. That evening, my father attempts an unexpected visit, appearing unannounced at our door. Ryan answers while I remain in the bedroom, adhering to my clearly stated boundaries. Morgan has asked for space and communication through appropriate channels. I hear Ryan explain firmly. I need to respect her wishes. I'm her father, comes the indignant response. I have the right, you have the right to request communication, Ryan interrupts respectfully, not to demand it on your terms. After my father leaves, Ryan joins me in the bedroom. You okay? I nod, feeling strangely empowered by this defended boundary. I'm starting to understand that family relationships should involve mutual respect, not just authority and compliance. As I prepare for bed, my phone buzzes with a response from Sarah. I understand completely. I discovered my adoption as a teenager, so I've had more time to process. Happy to proceed at whatever pace feels comfortable for you. We have time. We have time. Such a simple statement, yet it captures exactly what my parents failed to provide, the gift of processing life-changing information without artificial urgency. I save Sarah's contact information. Another piece in the complex puzzle my identity has become. Not a replacement for the family who raised me, but an addition to a narrative that grows increasingly nuanced with each passing day. Ungrateful. The word glares from my mother's email, the culmination of a 5-paragraph message explaining how my continued distance is breaking her heart. After everything we've given you, Everything we've sacrificed, this is how you repay our love. 6 weeks have passed since the wedding day revelation. My carefully maintained boundaries have finally provoked the reaction I anticipated, my parents shifting from defensive justification to emotional manipulation. I forward the email to Dr. Bennett, who responds, "This was inevitable. They've tried dismissing your concerns, then attempting to regain control through unannounced visits." When those strategies failed, emotional leverage was the logical next step. I draft a measured response *Mom, this isn't about gratitude or ingratitude. I've always appreciated the life and opportunities you provided. This is specifically about being denied knowledge of my own identity for 28 years, the deliberate choice to reveal this information on my wedding day, the dismissal of how deeply that timing affected a once-in-a-lifetime event. I am not rejecting you as parents. I'm requesting respect for my process of integrating life-changing information that was withheld, then delivered at the worst possible moment. Morgan *, the counteroffensive isn't limited to direct communication. 2 days later, my aunt calls with a transparently scripted appeal. Your mother hasn't eaten properly in days. Your father barely speaks at family gatherings. Is this punishment really necessary? I'm not punishing anyone, I reply calmly. I'm processing a significant revelation delivered at an inappropriate time. But they're your parents, she insists, as if the title alone grants immunity from consequences. Yes, they are, I acknowledge. Which is why I'm working through this carefully rather than severing contact entirely. When flying monkeys from the extended family prove ineffective, my mother employs a new tactic, reaching out to my in-laws. Ryan's mother calls me directly, her discomfort evident. Morgan, I don't want to interfere, she begins awkwardly. But your mother called me quite upset. She's worried about you. Did she explain why I might need space from them right now? I ask. Telling pause. She mentioned something about adoption information that upset you. Did she mention they revealed this on our wedding day? 3 hours before the ceremony. No, Ryan's mother says, her tone shifting. She most certainly did not. That context matters, I explain, recounting the bridal suite revelation without emotional embellishment, simply stating facts. By the call's end, my mother-in-law's perspective has visibly shifted. I'm so sorry, Morgan. Take whatever time you need. I'll handle any further calls from your mother. This pattern repeats as my parents attempt to recruit various social connections to their cause. Each backfires when the complete story emerges. Their selective narrative, focusing on my overreaction while minimizing the wedding day timing, consistently collapses under minimal scrutiny. Meanwhile, my communication with Sarah, my potential half-sister, develops carefully. We exchange basic biographical information and discover striking similarities: the same unusual eye color, identical food allergies, shared aptitude for languages. Would you be open to a video call? She asks after 2 weeks of text exchanges. No pressure, just when you're ready. I discuss the option with Ryan and Dr. Bennett, both of whom support the step while emphasizing the importance of managing expectations. The call, when it happens, is simultaneously surreal and surprisingly comfortable. Sarah has my eyes exactly, my high cheekbones, my father's, my biological father's smile. I've known about you for years, she reveals. Our birth mother mentioned having another baby several years before me. I've wondered about you often. This casual mention of our birth mother sends a jolt through me. You've met her? Sarah nods. When I was 22. She's not what I expected, but it answered important questions. I absorbed this information carefully, neither rushing toward nor retreating from the possibility of such a meeting in my own future. The delicate exploration of biological connections contrasts sharply with the deteriorating situation with my adoptive family. The pressure to forgive and forget intensifies as my continued boundaries threaten the family's preferred narrative. My parents' approach shifts again when emotional manipulation proves ineffective. At the 7-week mark, my father sends a terse email. Morgan, this situation has become ridiculous. Your mother and I have apologized repeatedly for any upset our timing may have caused. Continuing to punish us only hurts the entire family. If you can't move past this, perhaps we should cancel the family reunion trip we've planned for your birthday next month. Dad, the threat to cancel a celebration centered around me if I don't comply with their expectations. Crystallizes exactly why boundaries are necessary. I share the email with Dr. Bennett, who identifies it as a classic control tactic. The appropriate response maintains your position without engaging with the threat, she advises. I reply accordingly. Dad, this isn't about punishment but processing. I've consistently communicated that I need 1. Acknowledgement that the wedding day timing was harmful, not merely unfortunate. 2. Respect for my exploration of my full identity, including potential connections with biological relatives. 3. Recognition that trust requires rebuilding, not immediate restoration because it's convenient. If these boundaries mean the birthday trip doesn't work for you, I understand. Morgan, the turning point comes unexpectedly the following Sunday. At a family dinner I don't attend, my cousin Kate apparently challenges my parents directly, asking the question no one else has dared. Why exactly did you choose her wedding day? The actual reason, not the excuses. According to Kate's subsequent text, my parents' inability to provide a convincing answer created an uncomfortable silence that shifted the family's perspective dramatically. People are finally seeing it from your side, she writes. Your grandmother pointed out that in 28 years, there were 10,227 days when they could have told you the truth, and they chose the one day they absolutely shouldn't have. This mathematical perspective, the astronomical odds against their chosen timing being random or well-intentioned, finally penetrates the family's defensive shield. For the first time, my parents face meaningful social consequences within their carefully maintained community. When my mother calls the following day, her voice lacks the entitled certainty that's characterized her previous communications. Morgan, she says softly. We need to talk about what happened. Really talk. When you're ready. It's not capitulation, not a complete acknowledgement, but it's the first recognition that their actions warrant genuine examination rather than quick forgiveness. I'll let you know when I'm ready, I reply, neither harsh nor yielding. As I end the call, I realize the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. Not through emotional outbursts or vindictive actions, but through steady adherence to truth and boundaries. The power to define our relationship has finally balanced. They are no longer the sole authors of our family narrative. The coffee shop sits midway between my apartment and the hotel where Diane Winters, my birth mother, is staying. I chose it carefully, quiet enough for conversation, public enough for emotional safety, neutral ground for a meeting that feels both monumental and surreal. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Ryan offered to accompany me, but this felt like a journey I needed to navigate alone, though he waits nearby at a bookstore, ready if needed. Through Sarah's facilitation and 3 weeks of careful email exchanges, this meeting has been meticulously arranged, expectations managed on both sides. At precisely 2 p.m., a woman enters, mid-50s, slender, with the same hazel eyes that have looked back at me from mirrors my entire life. She hesitates at the entrance, scanning faces until our gazes lock in immediate, unmistakable recognition. Something primal shifts inside me at the sight of facial features so similar to my own existing on another person. For 28 years, I've seen myself as separate, distinctive from my blonde, blue-eyed family. Now I understand I've been carrying someone else's legacy in my face all along. I stand as she approaches, neither of us quite knowing the appropriate greeting for this unprecedented moment. She stops a respectful distance away. Morgan, she says, my name tentative on her lips. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for coming, I reply, gesturing to the chair across from mine. We settle into an initially awkward silence as the server brings the tea I ordered for both of us, a detail Sarah had shared about our shared preference. I'm not sure where to begin, Diane admits, cupping her mug. I've imagined this conversation for almost 3 decades. I've had considerably less time to prepare, I say, without bitterness but acknowledging reality. She nods, accepting the gentle reminder of my circumstances. Sarah mentioned you only learned about your adoption recently. On your wedding day? Her expression reflects appropriate horror at the timing. 3 hours before the ceremony, I confirm, Diane winces. That's unimaginably cruel timing. I'm so sorry. The simple acknowledgement, The unqualified recognition of how inappropriate my parents' choice was loosens something tight in my chest. In 10 words, this genetic stranger has validated what my family has spent months minimizing. Thank you for saying that, I reply quietly. We proceed carefully from there. Diane explains the circumstances of my conception, a college relationship that ended before she discovered the pregnancy. My biological father was never informed. She was 19, frightened, from a religious family that arranged the private adoption through their church. I wanted to include an open adoption option, she tells me, but the agency and your parents preferred closed. It wasn't handled the way these things are today. I absorbed this information without immediate comment, filing it alongside everything else I've learned. Not judging, simply processing. Did you ever try to find me? I ask. When you turned 18, I registered with Adoption Reunion Services, she confirms. When nothing came of it, I assumed you weren't interested or perhaps didn't know. Another consequence of my parents' decision, 10 years of potential connection lost. I would have been interested, I say simply. We talk for nearly 3 hours, covering medical history, her life after relinquishment, her 2 marriages, how she connected with Sarah 17 years ago. She shows me photos of her parents, my biological grandparents, and I see more echoes of my face, my hands, the way I tilt my head when listening. I want you to know, she says as our meeting winds toward conclusion, I've never regretted giving you up for adoption. I regret the circumstances that made it necessary, but I wanted you to have more than I could provide at 19. I understand, I reply, and I do. Her decision was made from care, not convenience, a sharp contrast to my parents' choice to withhold the truth for nearly 3 decades. We part with a carefully negotiated hug, neither overstepping emotional boundaries nor withholding basic human connection. We agree to continue communication at a measured pace, respecting that authentic relationships develop gradually, not through genetic connection alone. As I watch her walk away, I feel neither the emotional euphoria nor crushing disappointment adoption reunion stories often describe. Instead, there's a quiet completion of a circle, the filling of a gap I didn't know existed until 3 months ago. 2 days later, I finally feel ready for the conversation my parents have been requesting. I arrange to meet them at their home, a deliberate choice that places me back in their territory, but on my terms, demonstrating both willingness to reconnect and confidence in my boundaries. When I arrive, the familiar living room has been meticulously prepared. Fresh flowers, my favorite cookies arranged on the coffee table, an atmosphere of careful anticipation. My mother rises immediately, clearly restraining herself from rushing forward for an embrace. My father stands more slowly, uncertainty evident in his posture. Morgan, my mother says, emotion thick in her voice. Thank you for coming. I take a seat across from them, declining refreshments with a polite shake of my head. I think we're ready to have a more productive conversation. My father clears his throat. We've done a lot of thinking since our last discussion, he begins, uncharacteristic humility in his tone. And consultation with a family therapist. This surprises me, that they've sought outside perspective rather than insisting on their own narrative. We need to acknowledge, my mother continues, clearly working from prepared thoughts, that telling you about your adoption on your wedding day was deeply wrong. Not just poor timing, but actually harmful. I feel a physical release of tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. After months of defenses and justifications, this simple acknowledgement matters tremendously. We've asked ourselves why we chose that day, my father adds, forced ourselves to be honest about our motivations, which weren't as noble as we pretended. What did you discover? I ask, genuinely curious. Why mother looks down at her clasped hands. Control, she admits quietly. By telling you at a moment when you couldn't possibly process the information or ask difficult questions, we maintained control of a narrative we've managed your entire life. It was easier for us, my father continues, not because it was better for you. The honesty is startling in its clarity. For months I've analyzed their potential motivations, but hearing them articulate this understanding themselves carries different weight. We're deeply sorry, my mother says, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Not just for the timing, but for the years of deception beforehand. You deserve to grow up knowing your full identity. And we understand, my father adds, that an apology doesn't automatically restore trust. We're prepared to rebuild our relationship at whatever pace you set. I absorbed their words carefully, noting the absence of defensive qualifiers or subtle guilt tactics. This appears to be genuine recognition rather than strategic concession to regain access. I met my birth mother last week, I tell them, watching their reactions closely. Surprise flickers across their faces, followed by something more complex, fear, perhaps, or resignation. My mother's hands tighten around each other. "How is that for you?" she asks, her voice small. "Informative," I reply honestly. "Healing in ways I'm still processing." She acknowledged instantly how inappropriate your timing was, which helped me feel validated. My father flinches slightly at this, but nods. She's right. I'm continuing communication with her, I continue. And with my half-sister Sarah. I'm not seeking to replace you, but to complete a picture of myself that was deliberately left incomplete. We understand, my mother says, though anxiety shadows her expression. I need you to understand something fundamental, I say, maintaining steady eye contact. I can love and appreciate the life you gave me while also acknowledging the harm in how you handled my adoption. Both truths exist simultaneously. They nod, listening attentively. I'm not choosing between families or identities, I explain. I'm integrating all aspects of who I am into a more complete understanding of myself. But that integration requires truth, transparency, and respect moving forward. We spend the next 2 hours negotiating what this new relationship might look like. They share adoption records they've kept, original hospital bracelets, the few photos of my first days, legal documents I haven't yet obtained through official channels. I share limited information about Diane, respecting her privacy while acknowledging my parents' natural curiosity. The conversation isn't perfectly smooth. Old patterns of control emerge briefly when my father suggests limits to my exploration of biological connections. But unlike previous interactions, he catches himself, acknowledging the impulse with newfound self-awareness. As I prepare to leave, my mother asks tentatively, "Would you consider dinner next weekend?" "Just the three of us." I consider the request. Yes, I decide, but I may need to establish some conversation boundaries ahead of time. Rather than bristling at this condition, she accepts it with visible relief. "Whatever you need. We just want to begin rebuilding." In the car afterward, I call Ryan to share the outcome. They actually acknowledge the harm, I tell him, still processing the unexpected development. No qualifiers, no, but we meant well. Just clean recognition of impact. "That's huge," he says. "How do you feel?" I consider this carefully. Cautiously optimistic. They're trying. Really trying. And with your birth mother? How's that integration going? It's strange, I admit. Having these genetic mirrors suddenly appear after 28 years of feeling subtly different from my family. There's grief mixed with the discovery, grief for the years of potential connection lost. "You're handling it all with remarkable grace," Ryan observes. "Not grace," I correct him. "Strategy. Methodical processing. Boundaries." These words, once foreign to my family relationships, have become my framework for navigating this complex terrain. Not emotional reaction, but deliberate integration. Not forgiveness without accountability, but calibrated reconnection with clear expectations. That night, I update the journal I've kept since the wedding day revelation, documenting the subtle but significant shift in family dynamics. The pages track my evolution from shocked bride to strategic investigator to integrated adult navigating complex family systems. The adoption revelation on my wedding day will always remain a profound betrayal of trust. But its aftermath has forged something unexpected, a more authentic version of myself, claiming agency over her narrative rather than accepting others' convenient versions. I am Morgan Reed, shaped by nature and nurture, by truth and deception, by loss and discovery. And for perhaps the first time, I am defining exactly what that means on my own terms. The nursery walls are a soft sage green, gender-neutral and calming. Ryan assembles the crib while I arrange books on floating shelves, a carefully curated collection including both the stories my parents read to me and new volumes about adoption, identity, and diverse family structures. At 5 months pregnant, I've approached preparing for parenthood with the same methodical thoroughness that has guided my past year of personal reconstruction. Today marks exactly 1 year since my wedding day. Since the revelation that fractured my understanding of my identity and catalyzed the most significant transformation of my life. The anniversary feels important to acknowledge, not with bitterness, but with recognition of the journey it initiated. What are you thinking about? Ryan asks, noticing my momentary stillness as I hold a children's book about adoption. That our child will never have a moment like I did, I reply. They'll grow up knowing their full story from the beginning. Ryan sets down his screwdriver and joins me by the bookshelf, his hand resting gently on my growing belly. They'll have the gift of truth from the start. The decision to start our family came sooner than our original timeline, prompted partly by my deepened understanding of how biological connections can ground identity. Medical history from Diane proved invaluable during early prenatal consultations, knowledge I wouldn't have had access to a year ago'd. My phone buzzes with a text from Sarah, who has become not just a biological connection, but a genuine friend over the past year. Thinking of you today. Call if you need anything. Love you, sis. The simple acknowledgement of the date's significance and the absence of minimizing platitudes exemplifies why our relationship has flourished. Unlike my parents' early responses, Sarah has never questioned the validity of my feelings about the wedding day revelation. As if summoned by my thoughts, another text arrives from my mother. We're thinking of you today. Remembering the joy of your wedding despite our terrible mistake. We love you and are here if you want to talk. The message reflects how far we've come. She acknowledges both the celebration and their error without defensive qualifications. No pressure for response, just an open door if needed. Our relationship has been carefully reconstructed over the past year, not restored to its former shape, but built into something new, with stronger foundations of honesty and mutual respect. Weekly dinners have replaced the previous pattern of daily calls and unannounced visits. Topics that were once manipulated or avoided are now discussed directly, if sometimes carefully. Do you want to call them? Ryan asks, reading the text over my shoulder. I consider this. Later, perhaps. Today feels more about reflection than conversation. We continue arranging the nursery, creating a space that somehow honors all aspects of my complex heritage. A quilt made by my mother hangs beside artwork from Diane. Photos include both my adoptive grandparents and newly discovered biological relatives. Nothing hidden, nothing exclusive, integration rather than competition. My father has struggled more than my mother with this inclusive approach to family. His ingrained need for control manifested in subtle comments about confusing the baby with too many grandparents. But even he has gradually adapted to the new reality, recognizing that his place in my child's life depends on respecting my boundaries rather than imposing his preferences. The most profound change has been in how I navigate these complex family dynamics. Where once I sought approval through accommodation, I now maintain clarity about my expectations. When old patterns emerge, as they inevitably do, I address them directly rather than absorbing discomfort to maintain peace. Last month, when my mother made a passing comment about how I should decorate the nursery, I responded immediately, Mom, I appreciate your interest, but Ryan and I will make these decisions ourselves. Instead of defensiveness or hurt withdrawal, she caught herself. You're right. Old habits. Your nursery, your choices. These small exchanges reflect a fundamentally altered relationship, one where my autonomy is acknowledged rather than managed. As evening approaches, Ryan and I prepare for a small gathering we've planned, not a celebration exactly, but a commemoration of the year's journey. Diane and Sarah will attend, along with my parents, Zoe, and the small circle of friends who supported me through the initial crisis. Are you sure about this? Ryan asks as we arrange appetizers. Having everyone together isn't something you need to force. It's not forced, I assure him. It's deliberate. A physical representation of what I've been working toward all year, integration rather than compartmentalization. The doorbell rings at 6 precisely. My parents, predictably punctual, arrive first. My mother carries flowers, my father a bottle of sparkling cider in acknowledgement of my pregnancy. The nursery looks wonderful, my mother says after greeting us, carefully respecting our space rather than assuming immediate access to my growing belly as she might have once done. My father nods approval, then asks, "Will Diane be joining us tonight?" The simple question, asked without visible tension, marks significant progress. 6 months ago, he could barely say her name without tightening his jaw. Yes, she and Sarah should be here soon, I confirm. When they arrive 15 minutes later, the initial awkwardness is unavoidable but navigated with the careful courtesy we've all practiced during previous, shorter meetings. Diane brings a small gift, a children's book about family trees with a thoughtful inscription acknowledging the child's diverse heritage. As our other guests arrive, the gathering takes shape, not perfectly comfortable, but intentionally authentic. These people represent different chapters of my story, now sharing space just as the different aspects of my identity share space within me. Over dinner, conversations flow with increasing ease. Zoe recounts stories from our childhood, some of which make my parents wince with the inadvertent adoption references they contain, moments when relatives remarked on how little I resembled them. Questions about family medical history I couldn't accurately answer. "I think what amazes me most," Zoe observes, "is how you've managed this entire past year without the bitterness anyone would understand you feeling." There was bitterness, I acknowledge honestly. But it wasn't productive. Strategic response served me better than emotional reaction. "That's very you," my father says unexpectedly. "Even as a child, you approached problems methodically." I always assumed you got that from me, but perhaps, he glances toward Diane, who smiles. "I've always been the same way," she confirms. "My mother used to call me her little lawyer because I'd build such careful cases for what I wanted." This moment of recognized connection, nature asserting itself through nurture, creates a subtle shift in the room. My father doesn't bristle at the similarity as he might have months ago, but acknowledges it with a thoughtful nod. Later, as we serve dessert, I feel the baby move, strong enough now for others to feel. Without thinking, I reach for my mother's hand and place it where the movement is strongest. Her eyes widen with wonder. "Oh, that's a strong kick." On impulse, I extend the same invitation to Diane, who hesitates before placing her hand beside my mother's. For a suspended moment, both grandmothers, adoptive and biological, share the experience of their grandchild's movements. The symbolism isn't lost on anyone present. What could have remained a fractured, competitive family system has instead become something more complex but ultimately richer. As our guests prepare to leave, I find a moment alone with my parents near the door. "Thank you," I tell them quietly, "for making the effort, for doing the work this past year." My mother's eyes fill with tears. "We almost lost you because of our choices. That wasn't a risk we were willing to take again." "We're still learning," my father admits. "Old habits of control don't disappear overnight. But we're committed to this new relationship, whatever shape it takes." After everyone has gone, Ryan and I sit on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the early summer evening. His hand rests protectively over mine on my belly. "Did tonight go as you hoped?" he asks. I consider the question thoughtfully. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, undercurrents of things still unresolved. But it was honest, and that's what matters most. "You've created something remarkable this year," he observes. "Most people would have either cut ties completely or forced themselves to pretend nothing significant happened. Those options felt like continuing to live in a narrative someone else controlled," I explain, "either through permanent rupture or false reconciliation. I needed to write my own story. And that, ultimately, is what the past year has been about. Not revenge or punishment, not resignation or capitulation, but the deliberate construction of an authentic narrative that honors all aspects of who I am." The wedding day revelation delivered with such devastating timing will always remain a painful chapter in my story. But it catalyzed a journey that has ultimately led to greater wholeness. As I feel our child move again beneath my hand, I make a silent promise, one I've reflected on throughout this pregnancy. This child will grow up with complete transparency about their origins. Their identity will never be controlled or concealed to serve someone else's comfort. They will be given the gift of truth from the beginning, allowing them to integrate all aspects of their heritage into a coherent sense of self without the fracturing I experienced. What are you thinking? Ryan asks, noticing my contemplative expression. That sometimes the most painful revelations open pathways to the most necessary growth, I reply. And that our child will benefit from lessons I had to learn the hardest way possible. A year ago today, as I stood in my wedding dress absorbing life-altering information delivered with unconscionable timing, I couldn't have imagined the journey that would follow. The pain, the discovery, the methodical reconstruction of identity, the careful renegotiation of relationships. But here, on this porch, with my expanding family both present and extended, I recognize that the story that began with betrayal has evolved into something more nuanced, a testament not to what was broken, but to what has been deliberately, strategically rebuilt. I am Morgan Reed, daughter by both birth and adoption, soon-to-be mother, architect of her own narrative. And the story continues, not defined by a single devastating revelation, but by the strength and clarity that emerged from its aftermath.